The air inside the bakery was thick with sweetness, vanilla frosting, melted chocolate, fresh bread, but none of it could drown out the sound of humiliation echoing across the room. "Are you serious right now?" The store manager's voice boomed, sharp and cutting, turning every head in the elegant bakery. "You walked into my shop asking for an expired cake?" A small black girl stood frozen near the counter. She couldn't have been more than 11 or 12 years old. Her thin hands trembled as she clutched the edge of the counter. Her shoes were worn at the toes. Her hoodie was too large for her fragile frame. And yet her eyes, those big, dark, hopeful eyes, were locked on the glass display where dozens of beautiful cakes sat untouched. Behind her, customers whispered. Some stared, some looked away, and some smiled cruelly as if her shame was entertainment. I can pay a little," she whispered, her voice barely strong enough to carry. "It's my sister's birthday today." "She's very sick. I just thought maybe if there was one you were throwing away." The manager let out a loud, mocking laugh, an ugly one. "So now beggars are choosing dessert options?" he sneered. "You people always come up with new ways to embarrass yourselves." The room went dead silent. The girl flinched at the words, "you people." Her fingers tightened into fists, nails pressing into her palms as if pain was the only thing keeping her upright. "I'm not begging," she said softly. I just wanted something small, even a slice." The manager leaned forward over the counter, his face twisted with disgust. "Listen carefully," he snapped. "This is a luxury bakery, not a soup kitchen. We don't hand out charity to street kids." "I'm not a street kid," she whispered. "Oh, really?" he scoffed, eyeing her clothes. "Then why do you look like one?" A ripple of uncomfortable laughter spread through the bakery. The girl's eyes burned, her lips trembled, but she didn't cry, not yet. She swallowed hard and reached into her pocket with shaking fingers. Slowly, she pulled out a small handful of coins. They clinked softly as she placed them on the counter. "This is all I have," she said. "It's enough for bread, but I thought maybe today could be special." The manager glanced at the coins like they were something dirty. Then, with a sudden movement, he swept them off the counter with the back of his hand. The coins scattered across the marble floor, spinning, rolling, disappearing under tables. Gasps filled the room. The girl dropped to her knees instinctively, scrambling after them in panic. "No, please," she whispered desperately as people's feet shifted around her. "That's for my sister's medicine," but the manager raised his voice even louder. "Get up off the floor," he shouted. "You're filthy, you're scaring real customers." Real customers. The words landed like a slap. The girl slowly lifted her head. Her cheeks were wet now. Tears slid silently down her face, dropping onto the cold white tiles as she gathered her scattered coins with trembling hands. No one helped her, not one person. A woman in an expensive coat watched with her arms crossed. A man sipping coffee shook his head and turned away. A group of teenagers laughed quietly near the door. The humiliation was complete. Then, with one final cruel grin, the manager delivered the sentence that shattered what little hope she had left. "Now take your dirty money and get out," he ordered, "before I call security and have you dragged out." The girl slowly stood. Her shoulders sagged, her eyes dropped to the floor. She held the coins tightly in her fist like they were her only shield against the world. She took one step back, then another. But just as she turned toward the exit, a calm, steady voice cut through the tension like a blade through glass. "Excuse me." Everyone froze. The manager turned sharply. "You do have an expired cake for my daughter?" The voice asked again, even calmer this time. The room shifted, people turned, and standing near the back of the bakery was a tall, well-dressed white man in a dark tailored suit. His hair was neatly combed, his posture was straight, his presence was quiet but commanding. His eyes weren't on the manager, they were on the little girl. The manager scoffed. "Sir, this doesn't concern you," he said rudely. "This girl was trespassing and begging for expired food." "I handled it." The man's jaw tightened. "Handled it," he repeated slowly. He stepped closer. With every step, the atmosphere in the bakery grew heavier. "You humiliated a child in front of a room full of adults," he said quietly, "and not one of you stopped it." The manager folded his arms. "Well, someone had to teach her how the real world works." The man's eyes darkened. The girl stood off to the side, shaking, her heart pounding so loud she could hear it in her ears. She didn't understand who this man was. She didn't know why he was speaking up, but something about his voice, steady, protective, made her chest tighten with a strange, unfamiliar feeling. "Hope," the manager sneered. "Listen, sir," he said, "if you want to play hero, take her and go, otherwise," the man cut him off. "You threw her money on the floor," he said flatly. "You called her filthy. You told her she didn't belong here." The manager smirked. "And?" The man took a breath. Then he said the words that made the entire bakery fall into stunned silence. Do you know who you just humiliated? The manager laughed. I don't care who she is. The man leaned in slightly, his voice low, measured, dangerous. You should, he said, because everything about your life is about to change. The manager's smile flickered for the first time. The room held its breath. The girl looked up, and in that moment, standing between cruelty and destiny, everything was about to turn upside down. But little did the cruel manager know, his life was about to be completely destroyed, because the stranger standing before him knew a secret about this little girl that would shock everyone. The morning began long before the sun fully rose. In a small, crumbling apartment squeezed between abandoned buildings and broken streetlights, a thin mattress lay on the floor. A young black girl sat beside it, her knees pulled tightly to her chest as she watched her little sister breathe. Her name was Amara. She was 12 years old, and she had learned far too early how heavy the world could be. Amara's little sister, Lena, lay wrapped in a faded blanket. Her face was pale, her lips dry. Every few seconds, a weak cough escaped her chest. Each cough sounded like it was pulling what little strength she had left. Amara reached out and gently wiped her sister's forehead with a damp cloth. Please don't get worse today, she whispered. Just make it through today. From the other corner of the room, their mother stirred. Mrs. Johnson had not truly slept all night. Worry had become her permanent companion. Dark circles shadowed her eyes as she slowly pushed herself up from the floor where she had been resting. Amara, she said softly, you should be getting ready for school. Amara didn't move. She looked at her mother with eyes too tired for a child. Lena didn't sleep, she said. She keeps coughing, and today is her birthday. Her mother's face fell. A slow, painful silence filled the small room. I know, her mother whispered. I don't know how we're going to, her voice broke. Amara stood and walked to the tiny kitchen area, if it could even be called that. The fridge was almost empty, a half loaf of stale bread, a bottle of water, a small jar with only a few spoonfuls of peanut butter left. That was it. No cake, no candles, no gift, not even enough food for a proper meal. Amara stared at the fridge for a long moment, then quietly closed it. It's okay, Mama, she lied gently. Lena doesn't need a big cake, even a small slice will make her smile. Her mother turned away so her daughter wouldn't see the tears slipping down her face. Amara tied her shoelaces slowly. Her shoes were second-hand, too big and worn, but they worked. She pulled on her hoodie and checked her pockets. Inside, only a few coins. She counted them carefully on the table. That's only enough for bread, she whispered to herself. Her mother watched from across the room. Amara, you don't have to. I do, Amara said softly. She's been sick for weeks. She hasn't smiled in days. Just one slice of cake, Mama. Just one day where she gets to feel like a normal kid. Her mother couldn't argue, because every word Amara spoke was true. Lena stirred weakly on the mattress. Amara, she whispered, is today really my birthday? Amara smiled instantly and walked over, kneeling beside her. It is, she said brightly, and it's going to be the best one ever. Lena's eyes lit up faintly. Will we have cake? She asked. Amara hesitated just for half a second, then she nodded. Yes, she said, I promise. That promise settled into Amara's chest like a weight made of fire and fear. She stood, kissed Lena's forehead gently, and turned toward the door. Her mother followed her to the entrance. Where will you go? She asked in a trembling voice. Amara looked down at her coins. There's a big bakery downtown, she said. They throw food away every night. Maybe they'll let me buy something small or give me something they were going to toss. Her mother's hands shook. Those places don't treat people like us very well, she said quietly. Amara smiled faintly. I'll be okay. She always said that, and she always meant it. The door closed behind her. The streets were already alive with noise, cars rushing past, people shouting into phones, buses coughing out smoke as they stopped and started again. Amara walked carefully along cracked sidewalks, holding her coins tightly in her pocket. She passed schools where children laughed with backpacks full of books. She passed cafes where people drank expensive coffee and never looked down. She passed stores with colorful window displays that looked like another world entirely. But she never stopped walking. Because her little sister was waiting. With every step closer to the bakery, her heart beat faster. Hope pulled her forward. Fear wrapped around her chest. When she finally reached the bakery, her breath caught in her throat. The building was beautiful, tall glass windows, golden lettering above the door, soft, warm light glowing from inside. Through the window, she could see rows of perfect cakes, chocolate, strawberry, vanilla, layered with fruit and cream, shining like something from a dream. She pressed her face to the glass for a moment. So many, she whispered. Her hands shook as she reached for the door. She had never been inside a place like this before. The moment she stepped in, the warmth hit her. The smell of sugar and bread wrapped around her like a wave. For a second, just a second, she almost felt like she belonged somewhere safe. But then she noticed the stares. People looked at her clothes, at her shoes, at her nervous hands. Her heart shrank. She walked slowly to the counter. She waited and waited, until finally the manager looked at her. "What do you want?" he asked flatly. Amara swallowed hard. "Sir," she said softly, "I don't have much money, but I was wondering if you have any cake you're going to throw away today. Maybe I could buy it for my sister. It's her birthday and she's sick." For a brief second, the manager stared at her without expression. Then his face twisted, and the humiliation began. That was how she ended up standing in the bakery, being laughed at, judged, degraded, her small dream crushed in front of strangers, all for wanting her sick sister to smile. And now, she was once again standing in shame near the exit, coins clenched in her trembling hand, tears burning in her eyes, until a stranger's voice changed everything. Amara stood frozen near the exit of the bakery, her back pressed lightly against the cold glass door. The warmth she had felt when she first entered had drained completely from the room. Now everything felt colder than the street outside. Her fingers were wrapped tightly around the last of her coins. They were warm from her skin, but they felt heavier than stones. The manager stood behind the counter, arms crossed, eyes sharp with irritation and superiority. His name tag read Daniel Store Manager, though to Amara he felt more like a storm than a man. "I told you to leave," Daniel said again, louder this time. "You're disturbing my customers." Amara's throat tightened. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I was just what?" he snapped. "Trying to steal pity. This isn't a charity center." She took a hesitant step forward. "I wasn't asking for free," she said as bravely as she could. "I was asking for something you were going to throw away." That did something to him. Daniel laughed, a loud, bitter sound that echoed across the bakery. "Well, that's a new one," he said mockingly. "So now we're supposed to give leftover cake to every broke little sob story that walks in?" Some customers chuckled nervously. Others stayed quiet. Amara's heart pounded. She felt like she was shrinking under the weight of every stare. "My sister is really sick," she said, her voice cracking now. "It's her birthday. She hasn't eaten properly in days. I just wanted just one small piece." Daniel leaned forward. "Let me educate you," he said sharply. "This shop's reputation is built on luxury. People pay for perfection, not for pity." Amara didn't reply. She couldn't. The words crushed the air from her lungs. Behind her, the door opened as a couple walked in. They stopped briefly, glanced at her, then at Daniel. "What's going on?" the woman whispered to her husband. Daniel didn't hesitate. "Just dealing with a beggar," he said casually. "She tried to hustle expired food." The word beggar traveled through the bakery like smoke. Amara's face burned. She wanted to disappear. "I'm not a beggar," she said, her voice barely audible. "I just want to buy something small." Daniel's eyes flicked down to her clenched fist. "With what?" he asked coldly. "Pocket lint." She opened her palm and showed the coins again. They didn't look like much, but to her they were everything. "I can buy bread," she said. "But Lena doesn't want bread today. She's been talking about cake for weeks." She said if she ever felt better again, she wanted chocolate with white frosting. Her lips quivered. She might not get another birthday like this. Silence spread through the bakery. For a moment, just a moment, it seemed like someone might step in. A man near the front shifted in his seat. A young barista behind the counter lowered his gaze. A woman near the display case stared at the cakes, her lips pressed tight. But still, no one spoke. Daniel exhaled sharply. "I don't care about your family problems," he snapped. "I run a business, not a hospital." Amara's tears finally fell, slow, silent, one by one. She dropped her gaze to the floor. "I understand," she whispered. She turned slowly toward the door, but before she could leave, Daniel added one final blow. "And take your dirty story somewhere else. People come here to enjoy themselves, not to be guilt-tripped by poor kids." That was when her knees nearly gave out. Her shoulders collapsed inward. Her promise echoed in her head. "We'll have cake, I promise." Her fingers opened just slightly. One of the coins slipped from her palm and rolled across the floor. It made a soft, lonely sound as it spun. She dropped to her knees to grab it. Then another coin fell, then another. Daniel sighed in annoyance. "Unbelievable," he muttered. "Now you're crawling on the floor like a rat." That word crushed something inside her. She paused mid-reach. Her hands hovered above the tile. The room blurred through her tears. She forced herself to keep picking up the coins, because without them there would be no medicine, no bread, no hope. The humiliation was complete, and the worst part was the manager's cruelty. It was the silence of everyone else. A businessman adjusted his cufflinks and looked away. A teenage girl whispered something to her friend and giggled. Someone lifted their phone, but not to help, to record. Amara felt smaller than she had ever felt in her life. She stood slowly once more. Her back was to the room, her hand was on the door handle, and that was when she heard it, a calm voice behind her. "Excuse me." Not loud, not angry, just steady. Amara felt it before she understood it, the shift in the room. Daniel turned sharply. "Yes," he said impatiently. The man stepped forward from near the pastry tables, tall, well-dressed, composed. "So," the man said, his eyes calm but sharp, "you do have an expired cake for my daughter?" Daniel blinked. "What?" The man glanced at Amara, then back at Daniel. "She asked for an expired cake," he said, "so I assumed you had one." Daniel scoffed. "Sir, she's not your daughter," he said. "She's a trespasser, and she's finished here." The man's jaw tightened slightly. "She asked for food you were going to throw away," he said. "You responded by humiliating her." Daniel shrugged. "She's poor," he said without shame. "That's not my fault." The words landed like a slap across the room. A hush followed. The man took a slow step forward. "And that gives you the right to strip her dignity?" he asked quietly. Daniel lifted his chin. "I decide who stays in my store." The man's eyes stayed on his. Then without raising his voice, he asked, "Do you often enjoy breaking children in public?" That question cut deeper than shouting ever could. Murmurs spread through the bakery. Daniel's face flushed. "Watch your tone," he warned. The man turned his attention gently to Amara. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. Amara didn't know what to say. No adult had ever spoken to her like that before. Not with kindness, not with respect. She nodded faintly. "I just wanted cake for my sister," she whispered. The man's eyes darkened. Daniel laughed nervously. "This conversation is over," he snapped. "You can take her if you feel so sorry." The man looked back at him slowly. "Oh, I will," he said. Then he added, "And you will answer for how you treated her." Daniel smirked. "Good luck with that." The man straightened. His voice was calm, but dangerous. "Do you know who I am?" Daniel snorted. "No, and I don't care." The man took a slow breath. The girl stood between them. The room held its breath. Destiny hovered on the edge of the moment. The bakery had never been so quiet. Not a spoon stirred, not a cup touched a saucer. Every eye was locked on the man standing in the center of the room and the trembling little girl beside him. Daniel smirked. "Let me guess," he said arrogantly. "You're going to threaten to call the police or leave a bad review. I've heard it all." The man didn't respond right away. He crouched slowly in front of Amara instead. The sudden movement startled her. "You don't need to be afraid," he said gently. "You did nothing wrong." No one had said those words to her all day. Her lips trembled. "I just wanted to make my sister smile," she whispered. The man nodded slowly. "What's her name?" "Lena." "How old is Lena turning today?" 8, Amara replied softly. 8. The man inhaled sharply. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a clean white handkerchief. Without hesitation, he gently wiped the tears from Amara's cheeks. It was such a simple gesture, yet it felt powerful, protective, human. Daniel scoffed loudly to break the moment. "This is getting ridiculous," he snapped. "Sir, I suggest you stop this circus and leave with her before it becomes a real problem." The man stood slowly, and when he did, something shifted. His posture straightened, his kindness hardened into authority. "I was already standing inside a real problem when I walked in," he said calmly, "and its name is standing right behind that counter." A murmur rippled through the customers. Daniel's jaw tightened. "You're crossing a line." "No," the man replied. "I'm pointing at it." Daniel's face flushed. "You think you're better than me because you wear an expensive suit?" The man smiled faintly. "No," he said. "I think I'm better than you because I didn't just humiliate a starving child." A low gasp rolled through the bakery. Daniel laughed louder now, but it was strained. "You don't know anything about business," he said. "This is how you survive in the real world. Weakness isn't rewarded." The man's eyes darkened. "Weakness," he repeated slowly, "is mistaking cruelty for strength." Then he turned to the barista behind the counter. "Does your store throw away unsold cake at the end of the day?" he asked. The young man hesitated. He looked at Daniel, then back at the stranger. "Yes," he admitted quietly. The man nodded. "And this child asked to purchase what would be discarded anyway." "Yes." Daniel slammed his hand on the counter. "That's enough," he barked. "I make the rules here." The man took one step forward. The room seemed to shrink around him. "Not anymore," he said. Daniel laughed sharply. "And who exactly do you think you are?" The man didn't answer immediately. He reached into his jacket pocket, slowly, deliberately, and pulled out his phone. He unlocked it, tapped the screen, then turned it toward Daniel. "Call this number," he said. Daniel squinted at the display. "What is this, some bluff?" The man didn't blink. "Call it." Daniel hesitated for a split second, then smirking, he dialed. The phone rang, once, twice. A voice answered on the other end. "Good morning, sir," the voice said respectfully. "This is the executive office. How may I assist you?" Daniel froze. His smirk vanished instantly. This is Daniel, store manager at the downtown branch," he said slowly. "Someone just gave me this number and told me to call it." There was a pause. Then, "Sir," the voice said carefully, "may I ask who gave you that number?" Daniel's eyes lifted slowly to the man. "You did," Daniel said into the phone. There was a silence so loud it felt like pressure in the room. Then the voice on the phone said, "Put him on the line, now." Daniel's hand shook as he passed the phone to the man. The man held it to his ear. "Yes," he said calmly. "I'm at the downtown location. There's been a violation of company policy and public misconduct toward a minor." He listened for a moment, then nodded once. "Thank you." He ended the call, and then he looked directly at Daniel. "My name is William Carter," he said evenly. A ripple of recognition passed through the crowd. Some gasped, others whispered. "No, that's not possible," the founder. "The majority owner." Daniel's face drained of all color. William Carter, the billionaire who owned over half the company. The man whose name was printed in business magazines. The man whose signature decided careers, stores, lives. Daniel's legs wobbled. You're lying," he stammered. William reached into his pocket again and calmly placed a sleek black card on the counter. It bore one name. William Carter, CEO. The room erupted into shocked gasps. Daniel took a step back as if struck. I didn't know," he whispered. William stepped closer. His voice was quiet, but it cut like steel. "You didn't need to know who I was," he said. "You only needed to know she was a child." Daniel stumbled. "I was just following policy." "No," William interrupted. "You were following your own cruelty." Then William turned slightly and gestured to Amara. "This little girl came here with less money than you spend on lunch," he said. "Yet she still offered to pay. She did not steal. She did not threaten. She only asked." Daniel's voice broke. I have a family." "So does she," William replied. Daniel choked. The truth crushed him. William turned to the customers. "How many of you watched this child be humiliated and said nothing?" he asked loudly. No one answered. Each silence felt like a confession. William nodded slowly. "Your silence helped the cruelty breathe." Then he turned back to Daniel. "Effective immediately," William said. "You are terminated, not after today. Not after paperwork, right now." Daniel's mouth opened. No sound came out. "And for the record," William added, "store policy does not allow public humiliation of children, ever." Two men in dark suits appeared near the entrance. Security. They approached Daniel calmly. "Sir, please come with us," one of them said. Daniel's legs failed him. "Please," he whispered. "I'll apologize," William stopped him. "You already taught her enough," he said. "Now it's time the world teaches you." They escorted Daniel out. He didn't fight. He couldn't. The door closed behind him, and just like that, the power in the room shifted. William turned back to Amara. She was still frozen. He lowered himself again to her height. "I'm so sorry," he said softly. "You should never have been treated that way." Her voice barely worked. "Am I in trouble?" she whispered. William smiled gently. "No, sweetheart," he said. "You're safe now." Then he asked the question that made the entire bakery freeze once more. "Amara, do you remember me?" Her brow furrowed. She studied his face, and suddenly her eyes widened. You were the man from the hospital," she whispered. William's expression softened. "Yes," he said quietly. The room held its breath. The bakery felt different now. The air no longer carried cruelty. It trembled with disbelief, with awe, with regret. Amara still hadn't fully processed what had just happened. One moment she was being driven out like she didn't matter. The next, the most powerful man in the company had fired the manager on the spot because of her. William turned to the staff. "Resume your positions," he said calmly. But before that, he reached into his pocket and opened his wallet. "Who works the cake section today?" The young barista who had spoken earlier raised his hand nervously. "I do, sir," William nodded. "Prepare the biggest chocolate cake you have, white frosting, extra care." The barista's eyes widened. "Yes, sir, right away." William then turned to the display and pointed. "And every slice she wants, she gets." Amara shook her head instantly. "No, sir, please, I only need one." William raised his hand gently. "You don't need to shrink your joy today," he said softly. "Not ever again." Her chest tightened. Tears spilled down her cheeks once more, but these were different. They were heavier, overwhelming. Disbelief battled hope inside her. William led her gently to a nearby chair. "Sit," he said. She obeyed slowly. Her hands still trembled. "I want you to tell me everything," William said. She hesitated, then spoke in broken pieces. "My sister, her name is Lena. She's sick all the time. My mom works when she can, but sometimes we don't have enough. Today is Lena's birthday. She kept asking for cake." Her voice cracked. "I promised her I would find one." William listened, without interrupting, without judgment. When she was done, he exhaled slowly. "You kept your promise," he said. She looked up. "But I didn't," she whispered. They didn't give, William smiled gently. Not yet, he said, but they will. Moments later, the cake arrived, tall, beautiful, perfect. The barista carefully placed it inside a white box tied with a golden ribbon. William handed it to Amara himself. This one is for Lena, he said, and this one moment is for you. Amara stared at it, then at him, then back at the cake. Her lips trembled violently. I don't know what to say. William nodded. You don't have to say anything. But Amara did the only thing a child in her position could do. She wrapped her arms around him tightly. Readers, in that moment, the entire bakery changed. Customers covered their mouths. Some cried. Some turned away in guilt. For the first time, they felt the weight of what they had witnessed and what they had failed to stop. Outside the bakery, the consequences were already unfolding. Daniel stood on the sidewalk, pale and shaking as security flanked him. His phone buzzed repeatedly in his pocket. Termination email, corporate suspension, investigation notice, legal review. His entire life disintegrated in real time. He tried to speak. No one listened. Inside, William turned back to Amara. Now, he said, we're not done yet. Amara blinked. What do you mean? William stood and picked up his coat. I'm taking you home, he said, to meet your mother. Her eyes widened with fear and confusion. My mama, why? Because, William said calmly, you shouldn't be carrying this burden alone ever again. When they arrived at the apartment, Amara hesitated at the door. William noticed. Are you ashamed of it? He asked gently. Amara looked down. A little, she admitted. William knelt in front of her. There is no shame in surviving, he said. Only in ignoring those who struggle. She nodded slowly and knocked. Her mother opened the door cautiously. Then froze when she saw the man in the suit standing beside her daughter holding a massive cake. Amara, she whispered in fear. What happened? Amara rushed forward. Mama, he helped me, he fired the bad man, he gave Lena cake. Her words rushed out in a flood. William raised his hand gently. My name is William Carter, he said respectfully. May I come in? Her mother's knees nearly buckled. She had seen him on television, on magazines, but never imagined he would stand here. Her broken doorway. Yes, she whispered. Please. Inside, the air was thin with illness and worry. William immediately noticed Lena on the mattress, pale but awake. When the cake appeared, Lena's eyes widened. Is that for me? She whispered. Amara nodded eagerly. Yes, it's chocolate, just like you wanted. Lena smiled weakly, a real smile for the first time in weeks. William knelt beside her. Happy birthday, Lena, he said softly. I hear you've been waiting for this cake. Lena nodded slowly. Amara promised. And she never breaks her promises, William said. Later, after Lena fell asleep with frosting on her lips, William sat with their mother at the small table. I know this is difficult to accept, he said, but I want to help you fully. Her mother shook her head. We can't take charity. This isn't charity, William said. This is responsibility. Years ago, your daughter saved my life in a hospital hallway. I never forgot her. Today, I finally found her again. Her mother stared at him. Tears streamed down her face. What are you offering? William didn't hesitate. I will cover every medical bill, he said. I will move you to a safe home. I will make sure both your daughters are educated, healthy, and protected, and I will ensure you never have to beg for dignity again. Silence filled the room. Amara listened from the doorway. Her entire body shook. Her mother broke down, sobbing. I've prayed every night, she cried. And today. God sent you through my little girl. William's voice was steady. Then let me answer those prayers properly. That night, Amara slept with her sister, with a full stomach, with fear softened into something she had never known before, security. 5 years later, the auditorium shimmered with light. Golden banners hung from the walls. Soft music filled the space. Hundreds of people filled the seats, parents, teachers, benefactors, students, all gathered for one reason, the Carter Scholars Recognition Ceremony. On the stage stood a young black woman. She was no longer the trembling girl who once stood barefoot in shame at the door of a bakery. Her back was straight now. Her eyes were steady. Her voice carried confidence. Her name was Amara Johnson, and tonight she was the keynote student speaker. A gentle wave of applause followed as she stepped to the microphone. She looked down for a brief moment, then up. And in the front row, William Carter watched her, smiling, proud. Amara began. 5 years ago, she said, I walked into a bakery with nothing but a few coins and a promise to my sister. I wanted to buy an expired cake. Soft murmurs spread through the room. She continued. I walked out of that bakery with something far greater than cake. I walked out with my dignity returned and my future restored. The audience sat in stunned silence. My life back then was simple, she said. Survive today, worry about tomorrow later. My sister was sick, my mother was exhausted, hope felt like a luxury item. She paused, and then one man chose not to look away. Her eyes met William's. He nodded once. I stand here today because someone saw me as more than a problem, she said. He saw me as a child who deserved protection, opportunity, and a chance to dream. The applause swelled, but this wasn't the end of her story. This was the beginning of her purpose. Amara now lived in a warm, sunlit home, not luxurious, but safe. Lena was healthy, strong. Her laughter now filled rooms instead of hospital corridors. Their mother now worked at a community health center, stable, confident, and no longer living in fear of tomorrow. Amara attended one of the top private schools in the state. She excelled, not because her life was suddenly easy, but because she worked like hunger still lived in her bones. She studied late, volunteered early, tutored children who reminded her of the girl she once was, and every year on Lena's birthday they ordered cake, always chocolate with white frosting, just like the one that changed their world. One afternoon, William and Amara sat in his large office overlooking the city. You could have chosen any career, he said gently. Business, law, finance, why medicine? Amara smiled softly. Because someone once saved my sister's life, she said. And I want to become the kind of person who keeps saving others when they think they're invisible. William leaned back. You already do, he said. She shook her head. I'm just getting started. Across the city, in a narrow apartment with peeling paint and unpaid bills, Daniel stared at his phone. Unread messages, no job, no future in retail. Every company had rejected him. The scandal followed him like a shadow. The video of him humiliating a child still circulated online. Sometimes strangers recognized him on the street. They didn't shout, they didn't curse. They simply looked at him with disgust and whispered, "That's him." Daniel had once believed power came from control. Now he understood it came from character, and once broken, it rarely returned. On a quiet afternoon years later, Amara stood outside a familiar bakery again. The name remained the same, but the face inside had changed. She stepped in. No fear, no shaking hands, only memory. The new manager behind the counter greeted her warmly. Welcome, what can I get you? Amara glanced at the cake display, then smiled. Do you have any expired cake? The young employee paused, then laughed kindly. We do, actually, and if it's for someone in need, it's on the house. Amara's eyes softened. Yes, she said quietly, it is. She carried the box outside, not for her sister, but for a small shelter 2 streets away. That evening, Amara sat across from William on a balcony lit by warm lanterns. I never thanked you properly, she said. William smiled. You were a child, you didn't know gratitude. She shook her head. You didn't just give us money, you gave us direction, you gave us the belief that kindness isn't weakness. William stared at the city for a moment. You reminded me why power matters, he said. It only has a purpose when it protects the powerless. Silence filled the space, peaceful, earned. Years ago, a tired little girl stood in a bakery with only a handful of coins and a fragile promise. The world tried to teach her she was worth nothing. One man chose to teach her something else, and she built her life around that lesson.